We're still in the season of Easter, but our gospel is no longer an Easter gospel. Theologians that assembled our Revised Common Lectionary ran out of post-resurrection content. Now, Acts and the epistles do offer insights into how the church evolved from hiding in the upper room of a larger house in or near Jerusalem to encountering and preaching the good news of the resurrected Jesus, to the ascension, and finally Pentecost. And we will continue to hear that story in our first and second readings. But the Gospels beginning this Sunday are stories of the time leading up to the crucifixion. Now, during Lent, we heard two stories from John on the fourth and fifth Sundays. First, there was the story about the man born blind who Jesus heals by having him wash his eyes in the waters of Siloam. Second, there was a story of the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Now, Siloam is a spring in Jerusalem that was used during the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem to ensure that a clean source of drinking water was available. The waters were therefore seen as life-giving and life-saving in God's blessing on his people. And it is through washing in these ancient waters that the man who was born blind is healed. But as you will recall, the healing of this man generated much controversy, to the point his own parents were not willing to testify on behalf of the man or for Jesus. The religious leadership, John says Pharisees, and refers to synagogues, but given the setting in Jerusalem, this seems to be a story happening in the temple itself, which would make these scribes and priests were upset. Jesus had healed this man on the Sabbath. No work was to be done on the Sabbath according to the law. Healing would seem to fall under that ban. And yet, healing is something God does. So these leaders were stuck in a conundrum. Is Jesus from God because he heals, or is he from Satan because he works on the Sabbath? The man born blind says he must be from God because of the healing and cannot believe that this is even a debate. Jesus then further upsets the religious leadership by saying that they are unable to see the truth, yet proclaim to hold the truth, and so they are stuck in sin. This in turn sets up today's gospel. And as you will recall from the story of Lazarus, after today's gospel, Jesus is suddenly back in Galilee, and the disciples are not sure what to do in regard to Lazarus. Yes, this was a dear friend of Jesus. Yes, he was very ill, and Jesus even says he is dead. And yes, Mary and Martha have given them all hospitality any time they have gone down to Jerusalem. But they just left town because the temple leadership was threatening to kill Jesus by stoning him to death. Going back to Jerusalem seemed like a very bad idea. So today's gospel is set in the middle of these two events. In other words, what Jesus says in today's gospel changed dismissive annoyance into homicidal rage. So what could cause this transformation? Jesus proclaims two things. First, he presents this metaphor of the shepherd. Now, Abraham, Moses, and David were shepherds. And so rather than just being about the owner and protector of a flock of smelly, usually pretty dumb, herbivores from whom fleece, meat, and milk were harvested, the shepherd is symbolically a leader of the nation, both religious and political. So Jesus has just said that the religious leadership does not know that they are unable to see their own shortcomings, and then talks about the differences between the shepherd, Jesus, who is in the line of Abraham, Moses, and David, leading the people through his words, charisma, and healing, and thieves and bandits, the religious and political leadership of Judea and Galilee, who need to use force and deception to lead the people. And then Jesus makes it plain. He is the gate, the pathway, the entrance to life and salvation, and those who follow him will have life. The religious and political leaders, they are thieves and bandits who only steal from, kill, and destroy the people and the land. This is the message for which these leaders drove Jesus and his disciples from Jerusalem, and for which his return meant crucifixion. And it is the message that we are called to embrace as we call ourselves followers of Jesus. We are called to live life abundantly by following the Good Shepherd, listening to his words of compassion, peace, mercy, healing, and love of neighbor, and to live our lives in communion with one another. We are called to reject a culture of competition, destruction, and death, in which a few profit and the majority suffer. We are called to be Christ's hands and feet in this world. We are called to live this life and preach this good news, even when it is hard or may mean facing violence. Amen.